Good morning. I've called this talk Complexities and Simplifications, drawing a parallel to the theme of this year's conference, Point and Counterpoint. Initially, I don't think that works very well, but can you hear me in the back? Yeah? Great. Initially, my aim was to present 3 examples that illustrate this notion of complexity and simplification. But while preparing my talk, I soon realized that 20 minutes really isn't enough for that. So instead, I'll limit myself to one case, which I hope illustrates the point I'm trying to make. So what I would like to talk about today originates from my PhD research at the University of Reading. Here, over the course of the last 3 years, I investigated the evolution of Arabic type making in what I have called the machine age. The principal question in my research was simple. How did the processes of type making and composition influence the form of Arabic type making from the beginning of mechanical typesetting to the advent of Unicode? To find out, I went to the archives of the companies that made the bulk of Arabic type in the 20th century, notably Linotype and Monotype. The non-Latin type collection at the department in Reading provided my starting point in this research. It holds detailed documentation of Linotype's work in the field, covering important aspects of Arabic type making and typeface developments from the 1950s to the 1990s. Indeed, it proved to be a treasure trove for my research, featuring exhaustive business correspondence, original artwork, and lots of related material. Other archives also suggested themselves. Close by, the archives, the collection of Monotype Limited in Salford, Surrey, provided the perspective of a competing business. I just didn't have a better picture for that. And in Bad Homburg in Germany, the remainder of Linotype's archives also suggested itself for a visit. Furthermore, my fellow doctoral researcher, Alice Savoy, identified the archives of the American Mergenthaler Linotype business, which are held at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. So in November 2011, Alice and I spent a full week in a distinctly chilly storage depot, digging through barely catalogued boxes of business letters, type proofs, artwork, and other stuff Mergenthaler kept in its archive. And it was here, in this rather unlikely place, that I found the first clues for the beginnings of mechanical Arabic typesetting. In a box with the promising label 3614, I found a memorandum dated August 20, 1943. It listed the origins of Arabic faces in Mergenthaler's library. The earliest found had the date 1908, and it noted that it was designed from type furnished by a certain S.A. Mokarzel. Previously, the date 1911 had been cited in a few sources that mentioned the beginning of Arabic mechanical composition. And there never was an indication of provenance, or indeed any detail about its development. So intrigued, I sought further evidence about Mokarzel and his contribution to Arabic type. I discovered that his name was Salum Mokarzel, and that he was the brother of Naum Mokarzel, a Lebanese emigre to the United States. He had founded the newspaper Al-Huda, Arabic for the Guidance. It was first published in Philadelphia, and in 1903, the newspaper moved to New York. It set up shop in Washington Street at the lower tip of Manhattan, which up to the mid-1940s was considered the heart of Arab New York. It was the area in which the first Arabic-speaking people to arrive in the country settled and established their first foothold in the US. In a New York Times article of 1946, an evocative image of this part of the city was drawn. I quote, "On Washington Street, the pavement has big holes, and the windows are either opaque with dust or broken. The scent of unknown spices blends with the breeze from the sea and drowns the smell of gasoline from New York traffic. The restaurants and shops have their signs and shingles painted in curly Arabic script. And the little girl playing ball against the wall of a boarded-up house argues in Arabic with her grandmother, who is leaning out of a window across the street." End of quote. Against this background, Al-Huda's readership grew, and the newspaper soon sought to increase its production. But Arabic typesetting was a slow and tedious process. And partly because of the technical complications, daily newspapers were still a rarity at the beginning of the 20th century. Salum Mokarzel must have known that, and he therefore approached Mergenthaler Linotype, whose factory was in Brooklyn, just across the East River. And so they teamed up to develop the first Arabic linotype. Although I was not able to find details about their collaboration, it appears that Mokarzel provided Mergenthaler with type which he had imported from Egypt for his newspaper, for the composition. Based on this model, Mergenthaler then developed a Linecaster version. And here, Mokarzel must have played an important role. Indeed, it is likely that much of the conceptual work would have been done by Mokarzel. Mergenthaler had no experience or expertise in developing Arabic type, and undoubtedly relied on external advice. Although Hebrew type had been made before, and therefore the right-to-left composition mechanism had been developed, as far as I know, this was the first so-called complex script type development for Mergenthaler. And the tasks at hand were daunting. Popular foundry type, commonly used at the turn of the century, was marked by large character sets. For example, the renowned Egyptian government press type featured around 470 characters. And also newspapers used fonts of marked elegance and large character sets. It's just one example of a weekly newspaper from Paris. Moreover, many characters kerned and were therefore prone to breaking under the pressure of the printing press. Vocalized composition was ever more difficult, as Arabic vowels are little marks that sit above or below the consonants. Text which relied on vowels therefore required at least 3 levels of sorts per line of type. When the Swiss type designer Hans-Jörg Hunziker described this process, he likened it to the composition of a mathematical formula. By contrast, the linotype machine imposed its own complications. For starters, a standard magazine held only 90 matrices, a long way short of the 470 sorts of the Egyptian government press type. Furthermore, as most of you would know, Linecaster fonts could not kern. Because the matrices were arranged in a row, no character element could extend beyond the body. In the Latin script world, this constraint became known for the compromised lowercase f of many designs. Even the keyboard, something we take for granted now, had to be conceived. Which characters should it feature? And in what arrangement that is at once linguistically sound and efficient for composition? So in the adaptation of Arabic to the Linecaster, all of these factors had to be considered. A way had to be found to accommodate the limitations of the machine in the design of the typeface. and I'm using design here in a wider sense than only the drawing of letter forms. The first printed proof that I found of this typeface, which I believe to be the first Arabic linotype font ever made, dates from 1915. Frank Romano kindly offered me this specimen, and it shows a number of characteristics that became typical for Arabic linotype composition. As a result of the magazine limitations, many characters typically found in foundry type could not be implemented on the linotype. The 22-point font featured only 180 characters, yet it still required a machine with at least 2 magazines. This not only made it more expensive than a Latin line caster, it also slowed down Arabic composition. On this slide, you see how it compares to the Egyptian government press. So here's the linotype font is arranged in the same notional case lay, and you see many slots are empty. This very stark reduction of characters was mainly achieved by the elimination of ligatures that would usually be found in foundry type. And it is also worth emphasizing that these 180 characters were for one style only, containing a very small selection of punctuation and other characters. No bold or italic could be included in the setup. And as you can see from this image of the earliest Arabic linotype, also a special keyboard had to be conceived that featured twice as many buttons as the Latin one to give access to all those 180 characters. Now, as I've mentioned before, Linecaster fonts could not kern, and the reason for this lack is particularly well illustrated in this image. So here you get the row of matrices. While for Latin type, the absence of kerning was an aesthetic shortcoming, for Arabic it was an issue of readability or even legibility. Now let me try to explain why I would suggest that. In the Arabic script, most letters join, but not all of them, and words are therefore frequently interrupted by inner word spaces. While for Latin, this means that there are inner word spaces and word spaces. Whereas the latter demarcate word boundaries, the former don't have that function. So with two different kinds of space in a line of Arabic text, the visual distinction of them is particularly important. Yet the linotype's kerning limitation degraded that distinction. Applying the same color markup that I used here to a line of type from the 1915 specimen, we can see how erratic the spacing is. Overall, there is great divergence of width, and some inner word spaces appear almost as wide as the word space. If we now compare this to Decotype's Emiri typeface, the problems which stem from the lack of kerning become even clearer. Moreover, floating marks could not be placed in their appropriate positions above or below the characters, exacerbating the negative effect on word spacing and word formation. Therefore, and although a few vowel characters were provided in this first linotype font, vocalized composition was effectively out of bounds for linecasters. Now, overall, undoubtedly, this first Arabic font for mechanical typesetting was aesthetically less pleasing and likely less readable than its foundry type precursor. It showed the marked influence the constraints of the linotype imposed on Arabic type making, and demonstrates many of the features Arabic linecaster composition would retain for the coming decades. Yet the possibility to compose Arabic on a linecaster also meant progress. At this time, the linotype was state-of-the-art technology, and seeing an exotic script like Arabic on a linecaster must have been exciting for contemporary observers. For example, Le Gros and Grant mentioned the Arabic linotype in their typographical printing surfaces, published in 1916. Here, one gathers the positive values that were associated with technological progress. In describing the Arabic Lancaster fonts, Le Gros and Grand note, I quote, "The form of character is perforce more upright than would be the case were kerning permissible, but the result attained testifies to the skill of those workers at the subject who have overcome this really great and exceedingly complicated typographical difficulty involved in adapting the Arabic character to the restrictions of the composing machine." End of quote. One may now jump to the conclusion that this exemplifies the Western arrogance and lack of cultural sensibility that wreaked havoc on Arabic writing culture by imposing its machinery. But that might be simplification too. And one should also consider the following. An experienced hand compositor could set up to 2,000 ends per hour, whereas linotype operators averaged at least 6,000 ends and could achieve up to 10,000 in ideal circumstances. In addition to output speeds that were 3 to 5 times higher than in manual composition, the set type no longer had to be redistributed into the cases, completely eliminating this time-consuming aspect of typesetting. The linotype saved time and money, and therefore mechanical typesetting was desired by printers and publishers, despite the compromises it imposed. Indeed, if we look at the account of Mokarzel's niece, it becomes clear that great pride was taken in the development of the Arabic linotype. Describing Al-Huda's facilities in New York, she recalls, I quote, "Compared with its Philadelphia press room, which had only a few sets of type and 2 old-fashioned presses, Al-Huda now had the best Arabic press room in the world. No Arabic newspaper had comparable equipment, for Naum was extravagant equipping his New York press room. He bought set after set of type from Mergenthaler and machine after machine of the best quality. When Model 14 was newly brought out, he immediately bought 2 more machines. This model allowed the use of 3 different sets of type at one time." End of quote. So, although the Arabic linotype compromised the script, it also stood for progress, education, literacy. Indeed, in the case of Al-Huda, it stood for the free press and emancipation from repressive Ottoman rule. In the early 20th century, most of the Arabic script world only began to experience the revolutionary potential of the printing press, and the linotype provided a powerful tool for the rapid production of reading matter. It therefore should come as no surprise that aesthetic shortcomings were accepted in favor of the prospects that mechanical composition promised at the time. The themes of the apparent complexity of the Arabic script and the need for its simplification recur throughout the 20th century. For those of you who have been to Hong Kong last year, you may remember my talk about the typeface developed by linotype in the 1950s, which was actually called Simplified Arabic. Frequently, Arabic type designs had to accommodate the limitations of machinery and principles which originated from the Latin script world. The tension between script and technology remained a feature of Arabic type making, and it still remains an issue of considerable debate today. Yet since the first Arabic linotype was designed, numerous different and novel approaches to Arabic type making were proposed in various quarters. However, as I'm coming to the end of my time allocation now, their story will have to wait for another conference. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
This is a very good talk. But I'm intrigued by the name of the newspaper, Al-Huda.
It's like an Arab pun. There is the first line of the Quran that says that this book should not be doubted. فيه هدى للمتقين. It provides a guidance for the believers. Was Al-Mukarzel a Muslim or a Christian?
He was a Maronite Christian.
So he was really making a joke.
That I wouldn't be able to judge.
Another question is, what's the difference between legibility and readability? That's a subtle...
That is, I think that would require an entire talk, and I'm not an
I'm looking
expert
forward
in
to
the subject.
the talk. Yes. Yes.
Well, if there are no more questions, I would like to mention one more thing in my own interest. The talk that I mentioned last year in Hong Kong, I'm very happy that it is being published in paper in the upcoming typography papers 10, published by Hyphen Press and edited by the Department of Typography and Reading. So if you're interested to follow up on this one in more detail, you have an opportunity. Thank you very much.